The CPI report, Child Protection in Iowa, is brought to you by Vocal Victims of Child Abuse Laws. You can watch our program on Sunday afternoons here in Des Moines at 1 o'clock, and again we repeat it Wednesday evening at 9:30, all on Mediacom Cable Channel 15. You can email us at vocaliowa@mchsi.com or give us a call in Des Moines. My phone number is 515-276-3956. And I'll quote John's number as well as say that we appreciate parents calling. That's why we're here to talk one-on-one and encourage parents when they lose their children to the DHS or some activity is going on in that situation. John's number is 515-282-2672. My name is Don Burgmaier, and with me at the controls is my co-host,
John Harvey, and I say welcome to the CPI report. Yes, we do like to work with parents who are having difficulties with the department, also with the juvenile court, because we like to see that family of yours stay together. You see, one of the strengths of society is called the family. And if that family is diminished and is not supported, then your society loses one of its key benefits, and that is the association of having, or the benefit of having a family. We are critics of what we see going on in an area that is attributed to child protection issues. And we like to influence those protection issues to the extent that we can. And we also like to work with people who are the victims of the legislation that comes about. One of the things that has come about recently that is somewhat disturbing is something called the Iowa Sex Offenders Law. In a recent publication, the governor had signed the sex offenders law, saying that it is tough but costly. And I'm telling you, it is costly. And when things are tough and costly, we have to ask ourselves the question, is it a good idea to have things tough and costly? We look at something called cost-benefit analysis. Is it really worth the price that we have to pay? And much of what has gone on in recent days is what we would call a knee-jerk reaction to this business of child protection. A little girl, 10 years old, was stolen from her home, was misused sexually, then killed. And that was just before the legislature met in January. And much of the law that is being considered here and passed and signed by the governor recently is based upon the loss of that little girl. As tragic as that is, I think we still have to consider, are the measures that we're taking, the costs that we're putting into this, adequate? And do they do anything to alleviate the difficulty? The cost of new measures expected to double in 5 years. In other words, they're expected to come up to about $12.5 million just to operate or just to enforce the laws. Now, these are have nothing to do with the huge amounts that are now being wasted on something called the Megan Law. Has nothing to do with the huge amounts of money that are being set aside for what they call civil commitment. That means where they can jail you when you did nothing wrong. Once you paid for your crime, you can be turned around and sent back to prison for the rest of your life until some shrink decides that you're okay. Well, I was about to start enforcing some of the strongest laws in the nation to protect children from pedophiles, but the effort is going to cost millions of dollars a year. Can our poor state afford that? The expense of the new law signed Tuesday by Governor Tom Vilsack is projected to be more than double over the next 5 years, topping $12.5 million in 2010. The sweeping anti-crime legislation, which takes effect July 1st, was spurred by the rape and slaying of 10-year-old Gisetta Gage of Cedar Rapids in late March. Millions of dollars will be committed to this effort next year and each year thereafter, said Vilsack, a Democrat, in signing the House File 619. It is indeed the toughest sex offenders bill in the country, and it needs to be, he said. Yeah, because he's running for president someday. The measures, including longer prison sentences, more supervision of convicted child molesters, improvements in the state's sex offender registry, and DNA testing of all felons, come at the initial cost of $5.2 million in the next budget year. Can we afford that in a year in which they're shutting down schools because they can't afford to run them anymore? The expense is expected to climb steadily through the remainder of the decade and beyond as the number of sex offenders in prison or on parole continues to grow. According to a cost analysis done for the legislature, that's done by the Legislative Service Bureau, and they're called fiscal notes. And here's the expenses. Governor Vilsack has signed a bill that covers about $4 million. Covers about $4 million in corrections and public safety costs next year related to a new package of laws dealing with sex offenders, including sex offenders treatment, $1.6 million, DNA testing, $929,000, electronic monitoring, $879,000, sex offenders risk assessment, $227,000. Now, how can it cost that much to write assessment reports? $227,000, $250,000 for a handful of reports. Sex offenders registry staff, $125,000. Sex offenders treatment supervision study, $75,000. Now, as I read each one of those, the DNA testing and the treatment and the sex offenders risk assessment, tell me, how will that prevent child abuse? Does it really prevent child abuse? And we go on later on and say what some of these draconian laws are supposed to do. In 8 years, the prison population is projected to increase by 319, and the number of on extended parole is expected to grow to by more than 2,500 as a result of the criminal law changes contained in House File 619. The State House push to strengthen laws against child molesters was triggered by Gisetta's death. Roger Bentley of Brandon, a convicted sex offender, is charged with first-degree murder and kidnapping in the slaying of the girl, who was found dead March 25th. Bentley's brother, James, who was in jail at the time of the death, had been charged with molesting Gisetta. Legislators responded by passing a bill that, number one, doubles the prison term to 10 years for certain sex crimes against children. Do you think that that will have a major impact in eliminating child sexual abuse? But it will cost us, you see, for additional prison terms. Let's think it over. Does that really have an effect? And if it does, show us the figures where it has. In states where they have doubled the penalties, show us that that has had a tremendous impact on the incidence of child sexual abuse. It requires life imprisonment for those convicted of a second time of major sexual offenses. Do you think that the doubling the penalty or making a life term of two convictions of sexual abuse will really protect children, or will it simply pick our pockets and place more behind bars? Is that the real reason why they want this done? Is because the prison industry has become a lucrative industry. Make sex offenders ineligible for reduction of their prison term if they refuse treatment. This is a real stinker, because what if you were improperly found guilty of sexual abuse? How in the world can you, if you're a person of principle, how can you sit through a sex offenders treatment program to be treated for an offense which you did not commit? And there are people who will refuse to take sexual abuse treatment when they've not committed a sexual abuse crime. Even though they may have taken a plea bargain, or they may have been found guilty even by a jury or whatever, our system is not so great that it does not attempt to punish people who are innocent. I don't think that this is a good measure. So they can't reduce the prison term. In other words, if you're guilty and you admit it, you can get out. If you're not guilty and don't admit it and don't take sexual abuse treatment, you can serve your entire term. Now, something is wrong with the reasoning that comes up with that kind of punishment. And it is costly. In other words, we're paying through the nose in order to treat a person for sexual abuse who has not sexually abused a child. So the prison and these prisons do not come cheap. So it also requires a lifetime parole supervision of some offenders. Improves public access to the sex offenders registry and requires risk assessments for registered offenders who committed crimes involving children. About 6,500 offenders are listed on the registry. Requires electronic monitoring of convicted pedophiles for at least 5 years. Requires DNA testing of every felon as well as anyone who is registered as a sex offender. Improves notification of crime victims when an offender is released from prison. By the way, the fellow who's shown in the picture is, I believe he's State Representative, Senator Jack Kibbe. Jack Kibbe comes from the general area, Esterville, up in that corner of the state where we lost a little girl when DHS kind of mishandled a case up there.
I don't think who he looks like.
Is that right? There's Jack Kibbe.
Sure
And he flanks the governor. And do you know who that is to the governor's right? Well, that is Tom Miller. And Tom Miller has been campaigning very strongly for these new strict rules.
That's the Iowa Attorney General,
That's
Tom
it.
Miller.
Iowa Attorney General, yeah. And he's a guy that you don't have to vote for. He runs for office, and we don't have to vote for him next time around.
I'm voting for Ed Fallon.
Okay, for Attorney General.
Well, for governor.
You're for governor, you bet. Okay, so we're going to have improved notification. The measures would make a lot of difference, said Salister O'Day of Des Moines, a state employee who works with Sex Offenders Registry. Will be able to track them with DNA when they commit a crime. Big deal. After they've committed a crime, you'll use all these techniques. Will it prevent the crime in the first place? I thought that was what this was all about, is preventing it in the first place. The measures come with a price tag. For an example, the combined cost of a DNA collection kit and analysis of a DNA sample and development of a DNA profile is about $45 a sample. Testing all felons will cost about $1.1 million in the first year of the program, according to the Nonpartisan Legislative Service Agency. Electronic monitoring bracelets can cost up to $4.75 per day for each offender, depending on the type of technology used. The legislature came up with $4 million in the next year's justice budget. Now, how'd they come up with all that money? I thought they were having a tough time keeping the schools open. In the next year's justice budget for costs related to sex offenders legislation, by tapping into the unexpected increase in state tax collections. In other words, they're spending money that they think is going to be income. You don't do that in your family. If you get the inkling that uncle's going to leave you $100,000 in his will, you wait till you get the money in the account before you buy the Lexus, right? But not our legislature. They're going ahead and spending the money that they anticipate will come in tax collections. Future sex offender costs will have to be paid from the state's general fund, said Jeff Angelo of Creston, a Republican budget expert. It's an expenditure that all legislators are willing to make, Angelo said. They are. Maybe we better not have those kinds of legislators seated in our General Assembly. If they're willing to spend money that has seemingly no payback,
Not
simply,
even there, I should say.
right, you bet. I don't see how there's any payback to any of these. House File 619 creates a task force to evaluate the effectiveness of the new measures and recommend treatment options for sex offenders. They better have a treatment option for offenders who are not guilty and were sent to prison because of the nature of these kinds of charges that juries are quite often willing to convict. And quite often, the people that are charged do not have the kind of funding that it would take to have a tremendous defense counsel. There is also likely to be a legislative study committee formed this summer to consider other measures, including possible reinstatement of the death penalty in Iowa for certain crimes. By the way, Terrance, they don't have to reinstate the death penalty. We have cops who have already reinstated it on their own, and we've had 11 of them executed by police, and one of them is from a favorite team of mine down there at the courthouse called the Courthouse Security Team. State Republicans pushed this spring for a limited capital punishment law, but Democrat leaders were opposed to debating the issue. By the way, when the deputies do it, I'm told that the advice is that the larger the bullet, the less the paperwork, and I believe that in some of these cases, they're urged on to doing things that they wouldn't otherwise do on their own, and so we might want to look at what kind of supervision these deputies have when they go out there with a firearm 50 yards away from their appointed posts. And so I think it's going to be interesting. By the way, the grand jury will not be meeting on this case until July or August. So they'll let the impact of the situation die down. The public outcry can have a couple of months to die down before we turn it over to the grand jury. Well, you've got quite a number of stories over there, Terrance. Why don't you tell us some of those things that you've read about in the courts.
Okay. Yes. Thanks again, John. It's a pleasure being on your show once again. Don't know what I'd do without you guys. Doing the muck raking. There's not too many people here in Iowa that are bringing up these issues, that are bringing them to the forefront in a TV format, especially. I think we're probably the only one. But there was I wanted to give some comment on that story that you presented on the new law that was passed, shelling out, what is it, $4 million over the next couple of years. They estimate the minimum.
4.2 next year,
Okay.
rising to 12 million in 5 years.
Okay.
And that'll come 12 million, 12 million, 12 million, year after year after year.
Wow. And, the thing that really gets me is that most of these guys that are in office, especially the Republican representatives that are spending all these money, are disposed of great wealth. And I don't see how it is that, they're able to pinch and save and make money for themselves, but yet when it comes to our money, our taxpayers' dollars, they can spend it before it's there. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, especially to spend $12 million on the judiciary this year when the judiciary only asked for 7. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So, I think we really need to think really hard when we come around for the election time for these legislatures that are trying to appear tough on crime, and but at the same time they're being weak on sense. So they don't have a lot of common sense when it comes to spending money that we really don't have, and in order to make themselves look good and look tough on crime.
You can see how easy, though, it would be for a state legislator to say yes to all these bills that are coming through because of the impact and the criticism that they might get at home for tending to business and asking such questions as, what's it going to buy us? The 12 million,
Right.
what will it buy us? Will it buy us greater
Exactly.
protection? Will throwing money at the problem solve the problem?
No,
Probably
throwing
not.
money on the problem never solved the problem. Throwing some intelligence at the problem usually solves the problem, but I can see that the intelligence is very lacking. But back to my story here. I had a story here from the Macon Daily, and it's basically talks about what's going on in the judiciary. And for those who don't know, my name is Terrance Walker, head of VJO, Vote Iowa Judges Out, and we are in the process of starting a statewide campaign of voting Iowa judges out. Now, not all of them, but there's a lot of them that do need to be voted out because they are not doing their job, and they are definitely not deserving to be in office. But what the editor said in the Macon Daily, this was June 13th article, 2005, Alexander Hamilton thought the judiciary be the weakest branch of the federal government established by the United States Constitution. On paper, it looked like Hamilton was right. The executive branch commands the Army, the legislature controls appropriations and taxes, and both the executive and the legislature have direct links to voters, the ultimate source of sovereignty in the republic. The judiciary, by contrast, is dependent upon the executive for appointment and the Senate for confirmation. But in 1803, the Supreme Court declared it had the authority to strike down laws incompatible with the Constitution. As a concept, that isn't inherently bad. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Arduous steps are required to amend it. That wouldn't make much sense if any law passed by a simple majority in Congress were allowed to stand, even if it contradicted provisions of the Constitution. Even so, Thomas Jefferson felt that allowing the court to exercise such authority over the laws would place us under the deposition of an oligarchy. The current battle over judicial vacancy lends credence to Jefferson's fear. Democrats have been filibustering to block the Senate from voting on some of President George Bush's nominees. Democrats contend this filibuster is essential for preserving constitutional government. But the filibuster is not an established constitutional principle. It is a tradition of the Senate and in the past used primarily by Southerners to prevent votes on civil rights legislation. Resort to the historically stained filibuster is evidence of the seriousness of the struggle. Judicial appointments are tremendously important these days, largely because judges have gone well beyond their traditional role of interpreting the law and comparing statutes to the Constitution. For example, in a recent case decided, Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy asserted, quote, "It is proper that we acknowledge the overwhelming weight of international opinion. Yet nowhere in the Constitution does it state or even apply that our courts are to use international opinion as a standard for rendering decisions. One might think lawmakers of both major political parties would be uneasy with the overturning of American laws based on such non-American standards. Today it might be Republican passed laws that are disrespected by the court. Tomorrow it might be Democrat passed laws. But both sides of the political aisle have accepted the concept that the courts will always have the last say. That's why both Democrats and Republicans are focused on who becomes a judge. Right now the court system is loaded with Democrat appointees. Republicans aim to change that by appointing judges sympathetic to their ideological perspective. The shift of power in the courts is transforming our government from a republic envisioned by the nation's founders into something more akin to the republic envisioned by Plato. Plato was antagonistic to the idea that people could rule themselves. He favored rule by a few philosopher kings. The 9-member Supreme Court looks like the fulfillment of Plato's vision. It doesn't have to be this way. Article 3 of the Constitution grants Congress the power to regulate the courts. H.R. 1070, the Constitution Restoration Act, proposes to restrict the court's jurisdiction, bar reliance upon foreign laws in rendering decisions, and define the causes for impeachment of judges. Whether it passes H.R. 1070 or chooses some other vehicle, Congress needs to reassert the primacy of elected representatives in making the laws of this country. If courts are to overrule statutes, they ought to be able to point to the precise clause of the Constitution that invalidates the statute. Congress needs to scrutinize court decisions to ensure this standard is met and take action if it is not. This is our best option to try to ensure that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from earth. And I think that is an excellent point that he made, because we see a lot of opinions here, and I'm sure you have too, John, where the court does not refer to the specific provision that it is referring to and rendering their opinion. There was a case even involving myself, Terrance Walker versus Iowa. This was a 03-1173 case in the Iowa Supreme Court. You can look it up on the Iowa Supreme Court website. It's 03-1173, where the court didn't even refer to the issue that I had raised, which was definitely a winner. But since the judiciary is basically feels that it is at liberty to do what it wants these days, that is what's taking place. So we see a lot of these cases nowadays, and I think that, you know, not only should Congress act, we should act as a citizenry and start voting these judges out. I can only think of a handful of judges here that might not be true for. So, you know, if you know of any more, join forces with us, and we'll go ahead and we'll start the campaign not only in your neck of the woods, but statewide, so we can get these guys out of office. Feel free to contact me on that. Did you have any comment on that, John?
Not
Okay.
immediately, no.
Okay.
It was a good piece, though. There.
Yeah, that was an excellent piece, and I think that's exactly what's going on here. I have another article here. I think I dropped it, though. Hold on a second. This is a really good one. This was from the St. Petersburg Time in Florida by Howard Troxler. He's a columnist down there. And he I guess he's really perturbed at the judiciary in his neck of the woods as well. Uh, True news item. Charles Colt, then a Pinellas Pasco circuit judge, is arrested while attending a judicial conference in California. Police accuse him of trying to enter a hotel room occupied by two women. The arrest is kept secret by Pinellas chief judge for months. True news item. Months after the voters fired Circuit Judge Bonnie Newton as the state pursued disciplinary charges against her, the public learns that Pinellas past and current chief judges arranged for her to take a courthouse job to preserve her pension. That sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Right.
That happened here in Iowa. True news item. Brant Downey, a Pinellas Pasco circuit judge, disappears from the bench for 2 weeks without explanation to the public. Chief Judge David Demers says he is not at liberty to say why. Report suggests allegations of sexual harassment and computer pornography. Downey returns to the bench, also without explanation. True news item. In an unusual mid-year shakeup, Chief Judge Demers reassigned 6 Pinellas Pasco judges, including Downey, without explanation. Courthouse spokesman Ron Stewart declines to say whether the moves are related to Downey. Demers' statement, occasionally, we make changes in assignments in the middle of the calendar year, and this is one of those occasions. Well, Howard Troxler, he quotes future headlines from Pasco Pinellas courts. August 2005, large black helicopters land atop Pinellas Courthouse, emitting several dozen federal agents with assault rifles. Chief Judge Demers issues a statement. From time to time, federal agents raid the courthouse, and this is one of those occasions. And I'll skip some of these because he lists a number of these. July 2006, courthouse closed again. Eerie screams and creaking noises coming from within. Strange glow from the building at night. Courthouse spokesman Stewart says nothing unusual is occurring. August 2006, all Pinellas Pasco judges hold court wearing red rubber noses. Chief Judge Demers calls it, quote, an internal matter. Courthouse spokesman Stewart says, quote, the policy will have to speak for itself. September 2006, new rule states that all trial verdicts will be kept secret from now on, with jury foremen allowed to tell defendants only. Quote, that's for us to know and you to find out, Chief Judge Demers declines to comment. October 2006, entire courthouse covered with large circus tent. Chief Judge Demers calls the reason, quote, a private matter that I cannot discuss. June 2007, large pile of tax dollars placed in courthouse lobby set on fire. Chief Judge Demers declines comment except to say, quote, from time to time, large amount of taxpayers' dollars are placed in a large pile and set on fire, and this is one of those occasions. I would say we just had an occasion here occurring a couple weeks ago where the legislature elected to give over $12 million this year to the judiciary in this state. So that's happened here. That's not something that happened in the future for people here in Iowa. That's in the present. January 2007, or actually, what do they have on here? January 2007, courthouse document revealed the purchase of 10,243 banana cream pies. Courthouse spokesman Stewart declines comment, calling it, quote, a matter of security. June 2005 to August 2007, inclusive. Nearly 1 million Pinellas taxpayers and 18 million Florida taxpayers underwrite court system, their lives governed by judges, their divorces settled, their crimes judged, their disputes weighed, the course of their lives determined by secretive, none-of-your-business courthouse, while everybody feels smug and superior to the more corrupt courthouse over in Tampa. And I would say that happens not only in Florida, but in our neck of the woods. It's a very secretive organization, the judiciary, whom we don't know nothing about other than the fact that they do as they want and say as they want. And if you don't have a camera in the courtroom, they'll basically deny you your rights if you're not disposed of great wealth or of a good connection. So I'm here to say Howard Troxley, he's right on point, and I think that folks here in Iowa should also feel that this is right on point for us here in the state as well. Did you have a comment on that, Don? I think you was nodding your head on something like that.
Okay. Okay.
But-
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for that that report. I want to commend people around the state who are willing to roll up their sleeves and to help families who are having difficulties. One such person is Linda Downs of Ottumwa, Iowa. Don, I'd like for you to introduce a videotape for Linda Downs and let us know a little bit about what she's doing. And this is a videotape. Well, you can tell us what the videotape is supposed to represent. Don?
If you notice here, that's her website that you can get a lot of information off the internet. Here's another website.
Stay with your mic, please.
Another website that's got a lot of good information. CPS Watch, Iowa. We've recommended that in the past. So write that down. Now, I went into the internet on the website, that first website, Iowa Family Rights. And I'm going to read to you a paragraph out of it that they had in there. And this is headed up by Linda Downs from Ottumwa, Iowa. She's got a group going on over there similar to Vocals. The paragraph says, Iowa Family Rights is mainly for families in Iowa to join with other families who are fighting for change in the DHS/CPS system with unfair practices involving custody and adoption of children and to make changes in the laws of the state. It is also noted that many of the courts and officers of the courts in Iowa are in extreme need of an overhaul. Please join us in our mission to create a better place to raise our children and to ensure our children have a better system in place when our grandchildren are growing up. Iowa families joining together can and will make a difference. Iowa Family Rights has email support services as well as many local groups across the state. Our email group is a secure group that works together with other states under the direction of the American Family Rights Association and CPS Watch Incorporated. Our group has available to its members much information for a parent caught in the clutches of the DHS, CPS, and related unfair situations. So I encourage you to contact her. Okay, John, you got a tape?
You want to introduce the tape?
Okay.
Where is it and who's it? And tell about the cameraman.
Oh, well, I wouldn't want to tell who the cameraman is, would I? Anyway, well, I'll go ahead, since you're hinting that Don Burgmaier run the camera. And it was kind of hard. We were in the picnic area at Walnut Woods, southwest side of Des Moines, last Saturday. And we had a group of parents and grandparents there. Ed Fallon stopped in and talked for a few minutes. Linda Downs set it up, and I took the camera down there, and it was a situation where Linda Downs talked, and then the group talked. Some individuals in the group were making comments, so I would swing the camera around to the other side. Well, in process of doing that, where you get to see the nature out there and different things, so it wasn't always on individuals. And then I'm not sure if we showed this part, but toward the end of the tape, Linda Downs held balloons for I think around 10 balloons of representing children that has died in the hands of the DHS since 2001, I believe it is. and then she released them up into the air. Prior to doing that, there was a prayer vigil, prayer group praying over the situation. So, John, I'm going to turn it over to you. Linda Downs.
Fundamental liberty interest of natural parents in the care, custody, and management of their child is protected by the 14th Amendment and does not evaporate simply because they have not been model parents or have lost temporary custody of their child to the state. So there is case law in the United States Supreme Court protecting us.
Protecting us.
Right. It's there to protect us. What happens is, before we get there, before we can ever get there, the children are gone.
There's a worker in the Attorney General's office 15, 20 years ago, worked for the ACLU. He took a case here in Des Moines, I don't remember the name of the family, but he took it into federal court and he won. I don't remember the end result after he won. The order was to give the kids back. But he worked for the attorney ACLU for their money, working for parents at that time, you know, and then he takes a job with the the Attorney General's office.
Well,
What a money controls.
yeah. But the law was set up. Constitution of the United States and the law was set up to protect us. So I think what we're going to have to do is work on ways to make our law work for us. I think that's what we have to do. I think we have to find ways to make the laws are there. They're already there. And just read them.
That's
They're
true.
there.
We're being denied what the law says.
Right. We have to find ways to make the law work for us because it's there. Today we are facing undue government interference. Children needlessly thrown into foster care. Many times no efforts are made to place children with family. Parents' rights being terminated at a record rate. No due process, no accountability for the accusers. Parents are not allowed to face their accusers. Parents being threatened with permanent loss of their children for exercising their constitutional right. Parents being coerced into signing case plans and being forced to admit guilt to something they didn't do, giving up their right to fight any and all allegations. Parents being tricked into waiving their adjudication hearings, giving up the only chance they have to prove their innocence during a juvenile court intervention. Due process does not exist in juvenile court. Yet our government tells us it's in the children's best interest to err on the side of the child. When a child is needlessly thrown into foster care, he loses not only mom, dad, but other brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, grandparents, teachers, friends, and classmates. He is cut loose from everyone loving and familiar. The emotional trauma can last a lifetime. A recent study of Oregon and Washington State foster care alumni found that 1/3 said they were abused in foster care itself and only 20% were doing well. How can we throw children into a system that churns out walking wounded 4 times out of 5 and call it erring on the side of the child? Although it is the cases involving parents who beat, rape, and torture their children that rightly get attention, far more common are cases in which families' poverty is confused with neglect. In these cases, a child is taken from a home where there was no abuse and placed in a system where the odds of abuse are at least 1 in 3. Jordan Knapp was thrown into foster care in the name of erring on the side of the child. She nearly died. But even that isn't the worst of it. The more that workers are overwhelmed with children who don't need to be in foster care, the less time they have to find children in real danger. Children such as Ashton Paris, for example, he died. And that kind of leads us up to what we're going to do here. We've got a whole bunch of balloons blowing up. Each one of these little pink balloons represent little girls that died in foster care or adoption. Each one of these little blue balloons represent a little boy that's died in foster care or adoption. We're going to all come over here in the open somewhere where we can find a place for these balloons to go up. And we're going to hold hands and we're going to give a prayer for those poor children that died away from their families.
We're not going to see the balloon?
Greg, well, I'll tell you something interesting too.
You see the reflection.
Well,
Maybe we can put commentary in between there. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what we can do. I got something to say anyway.
The children who die in homes and who have
Oh, wait,
bumps
okay.
and serious harm,
Yeah, I had a
60% of them come from
Yeah, I had a comment on that, John and Don.
I mean, I can only
I find that to be a very high statistic. You said 4 out of 5? 4 out of 5 of the kids they take out of the home, they don't return?
this is how many children
what she
died
said?
in foster care and adoption.
That we know about.
That we know about, right. There's probably a lot more. We don't, we haven't got record of. So let's go out here somewhere.
Now, is
Where
that
can we
the
find
number
this
of kids this year that have been, or
and say a
past
prayer
4
for
years?
these kids over
I
there.
don't understand why they don't.
There's a
Okay.
big one on the other side.
Now what? I don't understand why they don't try to give the kids to the grandparents in a lot of instances. I go through these cases every couple of weeks that I see in the Court of Appeals, and the grandparents are continually denied, for the most part, the right to, well, actually, they said there is no right, grandparents' right to the child.
Follow the money trail, probably.
but-
No money to when it goes to grandparents.
Yeah, well, that's sad. Oh, there we go. Wow. Now, is that in the state? That's how many kids have been lost in the state of
Iowa.
Iowa? Past 4 or 5 years in foster care? Wow.
Considering everything, I think the cameraman did pretty good to get that shot and move that camera around and not be able to see what's going on all the time.
Yeah, if you do say so yourself, huh?
Yes. I want to raise and pay.
Wow.
Part of the group that was there at the picnic.
Incredible. Now, did any of the people there lose a loved
Yes, the one to the left, the camera a second ago, she lost her children a couple of years ago. Termination of parenting rights.
one?
It's basically all over for her, and you got to start fighting as soon as the DHS takes your children in the beginning.
Wow.
By the time they terminate your rights, it's almost history. It's almost impossible to turn the old boat around.
Hi, my name is Linda Downs, and I'm the director of Iowa Family Rights. Basically, Iowa Family Rights is an internet group, and what we do is we support parents who found themselves caught in the system of DHS, CPS, which is Children's Protective Services Division. We filled our files with information regarding ways to work your way through the system, information and links to other groups, places to go to learn how to get your files, how to get your information from DHS, how to direct your attorney, and how to handle your case pro se. Our group files are chock full of information, and it's all Iowa specific. So if you just go to www.iowafamilyrights.org, you'll find our webpage. From our webpage, you'll find my email address, and if you email me, you can connect with me, and I will give you a questionnaire to answer, so you can join our group if you'd like. The questionnaire is basically to secure our group because we don't want to be infiltrated. We don't need any spies. So we are very careful and we screen all our members so you're secure.
Anyway, that's the way it worked out.
I'd say we're 99% secure. We work with parents on an individual level many times. We have local group in Ottumwa, and we meet at the library. And this is basically for people who don't have an internet, don't know how to use the internet, don't have a computer, whatever the case might be. We try not to cause people to believe that we can do something for their case because they are the ones that have to deal with their case. In other words, I can't help you get your kids back. I can help you learn how to get your kids back. We are not attorneys.
Well, you can't transport it.
We don't give legal advice. We give information. Tons of information. We have about 40 members on our group, maybe 45 right now. And we are basically support each other, is what we do. We get in there and when somebody is facing termination and try real hard to help them hold their chin up while this is going on because it's a terrible situation. I've been asked by reporters before if how I check out to find out if this person is really guilty of child abuse or not. I don't really check out to see if someone is guilty or not. That's not my. I don't have any part of that. It don't matter to me whether that person is guilty of child abuse or neglect or whatever she's charged with or he's charged with, because about 50% of these charges are false to start with, and they're just dropped. And the rest of them are 75% shaky as to whether there's really basis for it at all. The people that have actually abused their children, if they are trying to work their way out of the system, more power to them. I hope they learn something. If they've neglected their children, sometimes it really isn't neglect. Sometimes it's just poverty. Sometimes the refrigerator's broken or their house isn't clean enough or who knows what. And the state sees this as some type of neglect. Well, this person, if they want to get in there and clean up their house and work on the situation, whatever it might be, to clear it up, I'm more power to them. I'm willing to help them. I'm not saying that everybody in the state is being falsely accused. I know there is real child abuse out there. And I hope that they're convicted in a criminal court if they actually did abuse their children. Because I don't like child abuse. But I also don't like CPS abuse. And right now, Children's Protective Services is the biggest abuser.
What is CPS?
CPS is Children's Protective Services.
And what do they do?
They are supposed to intervene and take over and take charge if a child is abused. They are to remove the child from the home if it deems necessary, and they are supposed to look towards relatives first, which they don't usually.
Why don't they look toward the relatives?
Well, mainly because foster care is a little bit of a money-making business anymore. It seems to me that foster care is chosen over relatives because there's an incentive to put children in foster care. The incentive being money.
Where does this money come from?
Well, it's from federal funding. Federal government.
Well,
Taxpayers.
I'm glad. Oh, taxpayers.
Taxpayers. We're paying the bill.
I thought you meant just federal government, so we didn't have to worry about the money angle.
Oh, no. We're paying for this.
I remember the DHS, the workers saying, Oh, this is paid by federal money. You don't have to worry about that. And the question was asked, well, where does the federal money come from?
Right, from us, taxpayers, people who work, try to earn a living. Them same people that go out there and say, gee, look how much they took out of my check this week.
Do you recommend a parent go after their records?
Oh, yes. I think that the most important thing you can do is get your records. Yeah. Yeah, you should have, you want to know what they're saying about you, don't you?
Yeah.
Is it necessary to have your records so you can fight against it?
Since all this,
Yeah,
they
it's
threatened me with
detrimental
jail
to
a
have
couple
your
times.
records
You
because
can get in a lot of trouble for it.
how do you fight something if you don't know what you're being accused of? If you don't have your records, you don't know what they're saying.
I'm not going to call my
You don't have everything in black and white. If you have your records, you can sit down and actually work out ways to deal with your case. If you don't have your records,
My boys are with
you're
me now all the
working in the
time.
dark.
The
It's
case
like
is
trying
not
to do
resolved.
your homework
It's
with the
not
lights off.
But my boys are with me all the time.
Do you recommend a person get their abuse report and work on expungement of the report?
First of all, I recommend anybody that's got a founded abuse report to appeal it immediately. You go in, if you look at the back side of a founded abuse report, right, in the little really fine lettering, it will tell you where you can appeal. And most people that I've contacted or that have contacted me say, well, we don't know how to appeal. Well, it's just real simple. You just sit down and you write down the truth of what really happened. And then if you have any documentation to attach to the back of your proof, or as proof to your appeal, you just attach it to the back of your appeal and you send it in and appealing their founded abuse report. And if you can provide doctor's statements or medical records or
I don't remember.
babysitter's statements, whatever the case might be, you can prove that you don't have a founded report. If you don't appeal that, then that goes on in the child abuse registry for 10 years plus. And it doesn't matter how much they tell you that they're going to take it out after so many years and all that, it still remains somewhere.
When you appeal a report, where does that appeal take you to?
It's an administrative procedure. It takes you back to the people that, the bosses of the people that made the report, and you're appealing to them to straighten it out.
What should a parent do when they are preparing for an evidentiary hearing?
An evidentiary hearing. Well,
we want to thank you for stopping by and taking a look at this excerpt. We'll see you next week.